country to embrace non-violent ways of demanding our needs. Kenyans and our leaders must be willing to listen to each other for the sake of peace of our country. We condemn what we have seen simmering as ethnic-based violence spotted in some parts of our country. We now make this passionate appeal to the President William Ruto and Right Honorable Raila Odinga to give dialogue a chance. We demand the failed bipartisan talks should be resumed in a different context that brings on board the religious leaders and some eminent persons and bodies. We believe that there is no problem, however difficult, that cannot be resolved through dialogue. We must at all costs avoid the loss of lives. No further blood should be shed. I repeat, no further blood should be shed in Kenya and beyond.
Economic distress. The high cost of living has created a burden on individuals and families, making it difficult for them to meet their basic needs and maintain a decent standard of living. We realize that many are struggling to afford essential goods and services, to secure stable employment, or are facing financial hardships that affect education and healthcare access. Within this background, the recently enacted Finance Act places an unsustainable burden on already distressed citizens, especially those within the low-income bracket. We, therefore, ask the President to repeal the Finance Act and institute a process that will seek to achieve the same goals within the context of the current economic context.
Well, that is the clergy led by Archbishop Anthony Muheria, who have called on the government to repeal the Finance Act 2023. Basically what they're saying, do away with it, go back to the people once again, come up with a new Finance Act that will govern the financial year 2023-2024. And so the latest to also, lay their words on the table on what they expect the government to do, or what they would want the government to do concerning the Finance Act 2023 that is currently in court. But later on we'll be listening into a report that was filed on just the bench that was constituted by the Chief Justice Martha Koome that will be listening into that case. Elsewhere at the Senate, Speaker Amason Kingi was forced to adjourn the sitting as members of the Senate were not available, largely from the AZIMIO La Umoja coalition. And so the Senate Speaker Amason Kingi was forced to adjourn the sitting after lack of quorum in the Senate. Now it is needed that about 50 senators are required at the floor of the House. But unfortunately, largely, most members of the AZIMIO La Umoja coalition said within the Senate were unavailable, and just a few individuals from the Kenya Kwanza side. So let's listen in to Speaker Amason Kingi earlier this morning.
Honorable Senators, can you be up? Honorable Senators, there being no quorum, and having rung the bell pursuant to the provisions of Standing Order 40, the Senate stands adjourned until today, Wednesday, 19th July 2023, at 2:30 p.m.
Of the Senate this morning, due to a lack of a quorum, 15 members were required for a business to be transacted this morning. However, that was not achieved. Senators will be resuming this afternoon for the second sitting of the day.
Now, the Law Society of Kenya wants the Independent Policing Oversight Authority, IPOA, to investigate the deaths and injuries during the anti-government demonstrations that happened on Wednesday, July 12th. LSK President Eric Theuri, in a statement, expressed concern over the use of violence during the protest, seeking further probe into the matter. He called on the government and the opposition to consider dialogue in resolving socio-economic and political grievances. In addition, Theuri noted the need for peaceful protests to prevail without violence, vandalism, or looting.
Concerned by the widespread cases of violence and allegations of unnecessary or disproportionate use of violence, including the use of firearms by the police during the recent protests. There are reports of a number of people who have been killed and a number have been injured in the demonstrations. The right to protest plays a crucial role in any democratic society. It provides a platform for people to express their views, call for change, and influence government policy. It is a right that is guaranteed under Article 37 of the Kenyan Constitution, which provides that every person has the right, peacefully and unarmed, to assemble, to demonstrate, to picket, and to present petitions to public authorities. This right is also guaranteed under regional and international human rights instruments that have been ratified by Kenya, including Article 11 of the African Charter on Human and People's Rights, famously known as the Banjul Charter, and Article 21 of the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. The security that has been provided to leaders of the opposition, some of whom enjoy security by virtue of the positions that they hold, it will be a height of irresponsibility. It demonstrates that the police service has taken sides in a political contest. It is an act that is grossly irresponsible. We call on members of the public to go out and protest, but to do so peacefully and to go out unarmed. We call on the police to provide security.
Chief Justice Martha Koome has appointed High Court Judge David Majanja to lead a bench of 3 judges who will hear the case challenging the implementation of the Finance Act 2023. The judges are expected to set a date for the hearing, and the decision has been made after Milimani High Court Judge Mugure Thande suspended the Finance Act and directed that the file be placed before the Chief Justice for directions. Roifan Shikuku with that report.
The 3-judge bench will be constituted by Justice Lawrence Mugambi, Justice Christine Moeli, and will be led by Justice David Majanja. The bench is expected to determine the petition filed by Busia Senator Okiya Omtatah and AZIMIO La Umoja One Kenya Coalition.
The power to impose tax is not absolute. It's a donated power by the people of Kenya, and the organ that is mandated to impose tax is Parliament.
The petitioners argue that President Ruto's assenting of the finance bill into an act was done without following the correct procedure. Okiya Omtatah also cited the Energy and Petroleum Regulatory Authority Director General Daniel Kiptoo for contempt for disobeying a court order to suspend the act's implementation. He emphasized that the rise of fuel prices will have severe impact on the cost of living and deny citizens the right to live a humanly dignified life.
Parliament has lost its autonomy. Parliament has become a small appendix of the executive, and Parliament does what the executive wants because the majority side is part of the executive.
The Finance Act, which came into force on July 1, 2023, makes a number of changes to Kenya's tax laws, including increase in the value-added tax rate from 8% to 16%, introduction of a digital asset tax, removal of exemptions for goods and services used for construction of tourism facilities, recreational parks, and convention and conference services, and other changes. The government attempted to have the petitions dismissed by filing objections, though Justice Thande rejected on the ground that the applicant had raised important issues that needed to be addressed. For EBN TV, I'm Roifan Shikuku.
All right, so let's keep up with what is happening across the country on the AZIMIO La Umoja protest. And earlier on, we had our reporters on the ground go out to speak to some of the business people or residents within Nairobi County on their thoughts concerning the AZIMIO La Umoja demonstrations, the ripple effects or the implications of those protests, largely crying about, fear of vandalism for their businesses, as well as the economic hard times that the country is going through, and the worst scenarios, the worst case scenarios post the AZIMIO La Umoja demonstration. So let's listen in to a few of the residents within Nairobi County.
Nasema ikansoliwe, haifai kuwa maandamano, na pia Laila aambiwe tu asimamisha hii maandamano. Jua akisema hakuna maandamano itasimamishwa. Hiyo
ni sawa, na pia naona imeathiri biashara yako ama
kabisa. Inaathiri kabisa juu sasa nimefunga kazi. Sasa nafungua na uoga. Na siwezi nikafungua juu naweza fungua watu wa maandamano wakuja na wanifamie. Alafu
na hii maandamano chenye kinaendelea ni uporaji. Si maandamano. Hii maandamano yenye najua maandamano ya ukweli ni ile watu wanaandamana kwa barabara bila kunguza kitu ya mtu. Na kama ni maandamano, mimi sioni kama kuna maana maandamano yoyote hapa.
Na hapo jana jioni tuliona kuwa shule kutoka kaunti ya Nairobi, Kisumu na kaunti ya Mombasa ilisemekana kwamba shule za umma za msingi zifungwe. Wewe unawazo lipi kuhusu hilo?
Chenye naona kwanza hiyo ilikuwa ni saa hii watoto, unajua watoto wanaambatana na syllabus. Already zile syllabus ile masomo wangesoma leo na kesho kutwa, hiyo imekanzoliwa. Unajua sasa walimu wanafuata kulingana na vile kalenda ya masomo inaendelea. Kwa hivyo naona hata walimu hata watoto saa hii kwa akili yao watakuwa wakikumbuka kuna wakati hawakwenda shule siku 3. Sababu gani? Kulikuwa kumeitishwa maandamano. Hiyo maandamano, na sasa hivi watoto wanakaa kwa TV wanaona vile kuna furugwa. Ujue kwanza hiyo ni picha mbaya sana kwa hao watoto tunalea saa hii. Kwa akili yao watakuwa wanajua kuna wakati kulikuwa na maandamano, na maybe wengine hiyo kitu itawaingia kwa akili, wajue ukirusha mawe ndio unapata haki yako.
Iendelee tu mpaka kwenye serikali itaamua kufanya mabadilisho. Watu wanaumia, watu wanateseka. Kwa hivyo maandamano itaendelea hata kaita miezi 6 mpaka serikali ifanye mabadiliko.
Na una uhakika baada ya maandamano gharama ya maisha itashuka?
Tutapambana tu, ikosa ishuke, tutapambana mpaka vitu zibadilike. Mabadiliko ndio tunataka. Na uhakika. Juu hakuna revenue itakuwa inaingia, watu watahangaika, business community itashida. Na tutasurvive kama watu wa biashara sisi.
Well, those are a couple of residents within the Nairobi County varying opinions and views on just whether or not protests should be in place or not completely. So we still have our teams out there on the ground, and they'll be bringing us the latest. In fact, we are waiting upon one team that is at Jogoro just to give us a brief scenario of what is happening. Remember, that is one of the roads that lead to the Jacaranda grounds, and so it plays a critical role on whether or not security is beefed up or not, what is the activity like on ground. So hopefully they do make it in time, and we'll be able to bring you an update from Jogorod in just a bit. So the situation continues to change across Mombasa County. Earlier on, there were running battles between police and protesters, police lobbing tear gas. A couple of gunshots sound were heard in Mombasa County, as well as, a special team of GSU officers who also were able to get to that location. So let's take a look at just the earlier scenario of what was happening in Mombasa County.
Wataturusha mawe hao jamaa. Toka Chesoli. Wanarusha mawe.
Well, as they say in Swahili, mguu niponye, and that is exactly what is happening right there. As you've seen, quite a lot of residents who have been perhaps evading to be caught up in the snarl-up, others part of the protest themselves. We've seen, black smoke in areas of Mombasa County, as well as, bonfires that have been lit by the protesters. Talk about tear gas canisters, talk about sounds of gunshots. And so that is something that keeps on developing. We're keeping tabs with that. And the latest details will be brought to you in due course. Now, that is not very much different from what was happening in Kisumu County earlier on, where residents have barricaded roads, major roads that lead to the central business district of Kisumu County. And remember, this is an area that is very much the backyard of AZIMIO Umoja leader Raila Odinga. And so here is what one of the protesters, or a couple of them, had to say earlier on as they had smeared maize flour all over themselves.
Nimekuja kwa barabara juu ya unga. Unga lazima bei irudishwe chini. Tunaumia sisi kama wananchi wa Kenya. Tafadhali wana Kenya, Ruto aturudishie unga ya chini, bei ya unga chini.
Na maandamano ya leo hatungependelea kurushwa. Leo tuko na nyinyi. Sasa hii tuko na nyinyi. Leo tuko na nyinyi. Hatutaogopa. Na tutakimbia. Hatutakimbia. Na sisi ni Wakenya, tuko na haki ya kuenda maandamano. Maandamano.
Well, those are protesters in Kisumu County. Protests have also been witnessed across Migori County, Homa Bay County, and Makueni County, where the protests, have largely been very much anticipated in those particular regions. Now, remember, just last week, the President William Ruto was in Homa Bay County for the homecoming as well as Thanksgiving service for the Interior Principal Secretary Raymond Omolo, and urged the residents not to engage in those kinds of demonstrations. Not just him, but also other Kenya Kwanza leaders have, urged residents to keep off the protests. And so whether or not they had the president, you'll be the judge of that, but that has been the situation largely in Kisumu County. So let's take a look at the Nairobi Central Business District, one of the regions that has largely witnessed a go-slow of activities, not as much traffic of people as you'd anticipate a capital city would have, as well as less vehicles on the roads, perhaps less public service vehicles as well plying various routes. And as you can see on your screens, empty streets, just as the headline says there. Businesses shut down, 1 or 2 people just, perhaps going on their businesses, motorcycles as well, plying various pedestrians or passengers to various routes. But this is not normally what you would expect. CBD would have business unusual, term it. As you know, the fear of unknown is what perhaps compels most of them, or most of Kenyans, to stay home and just, keep off such a busy area. Now remember, this is one of those targeted areas by the AZIMIO La Umoja One Kenya coalition, as they've always planned to hold a rally within the central business district, but have always been cordoned by heavy police presence across major roads or routes that lead to Nairobi town. And so we are keeping tabs as well with the AZIMIO La Umoja leaders on whether or not they will be able to leave wherever places they may be to the 3 key locations that they have mentioned, including Jacaranda grounds, Kamukunji grounds, as well as Joseph Kang'ethe grounds within Woodley area in Nairobi. We have, been able to access reports that indicate that the Jacaranda grounds and Kamukunji grounds has heavy police presence there, just as the police try to keep or to ensure that no rally takes place in those key grounds, which are key AZIMIO grounds. Motorcycles continue to operate, perhaps a few private vehicles here and there, but largely businesses shut due to the fear of vandalism or looting or violence that may erupt within the central business district. That was at Olympic Kibra earlier on, one as well of the key backgrounds of AZIMIO La Umoja leader Raila Odinga, Olympic Kibra, where businesses remain shut largely, but youths forming in small groups, as well as the bonfires that have been lit across the roads in Olympic Kibra. So if we could take a look at Kibra and how it looked earlier on, there you go. As you can see, burning tires in the middle of the road, perhaps to signal or to symbolize, no way through, heavy police presence. No, I believe this should be Mombasa, if I'm not wrong. This is Mombasa town, where police were trying to put off fire that had been lit earlier on, doing whatever means they can necessary to do so. And so they continue to be at the center. Now we do have the Kibra one, that is Olympic Kibra now, and that was the situation earlier on. We're keeping tabs as well to see what changes, what does not, and whether this will remain the same throughout this afternoon. Now, the anticipation is that perhaps in the afternoon things are likely to change, as witnessed in previous protests, where the momentum picks up in the late hours of the day and goes on to the late hours. So our eyes and ears are on the ground. Okay, now, location of President William Ruto. He is expected to be in Kericho in the Rift Valley backyard this afternoon. He's expected to be in the Rift Valley backyard, perhaps also just to send out that strong message to other Kenyans that, business continues as usual and working hours are on. He is there on an official visit. He's set to open a classroom in one of the schools in Kericho in Rift Valley. And the location of the former Prime Minister Raila Odinga and AZIMIO La Umoja One Kenya coalition remains unknown. No one knows where he is, and no reports have come out on just where he's expected to be at this point or this afternoon. And so the AZIMIO La Umoja One Kenya coalition President Raila Odinga's location remains unknown, despite rumors or reports that he is set or he is currently out of the country. But due to just not confirming those reports with the camp or Raila Odinga's camp himself. The location remains unknown, even as various leaders across the country under the AZIMIO La Umoja One Kenya coalition are set to lead various protests in their own towns. What we witnessed last Wednesday was, Martha Karua in Kirinyaga County, Stephen Kalonzo Musyoka in, Makueni County. What we saw was also Professor George Wajakoya in Busia County. What we saw was also former Governor Wycliffe Oparanya in Kakamega County leading protests right from their counties. A strategy, you might call it. And so that is something we're also keen to see whether that happens this afternoon. Largely, what we'd say is there has been no word out from either of the AZIMIO La Umoja principals other than Martha Karua, who just tweeted and said, aluta continua. Other than that, no official word has come from the camp with regards to their locations, where they're set to start from, where they're set to go. But that is something that we will be keeping tabs on. So, ladies and gentlemen, at that point, I hope you're really up to date with the latest that is happening across the country concerning the AZIMIO La Umoja protest. We continue to urge our viewers or our audience or the general public to share any information that they may have concerning the protests on our official WhatsApp number, and within the day or eventually we'll be able to pick it up and just as well share it with the other general public in our subsequent updates that will be coming to you this afternoon. So keep watching EBN TV. We are transforming your world.
Thank you.